Now, I want to return to the concerns that are mounting in the community when it comes to the Islamist terror threat. We're learning more and more each day about the juveniles arrested last week on terror charges, including today that a 17-year-old boy alleged to be in possession of extremist propaganda has in fact been granted bail. Joining me now, foreign editor for The Australian, Greg Sheridan. Well, Greg, I've said it multiple times. You wrote about it very powerfully yesterday in The Australian. Our authorities have got to be honest when discussing the Islamist threat, don't they?
Oh, absolutely, Peter. And I'd pay a compliment to you. I saw one of your programs last week. One of your panel called it Islamic terrorism, and you said, no, it's better to call it Islamist terrorism. That's what it is. Islamism is the ideology that Islam, a very conservative interpretation of Islam, should rule all state government matters, and the terrorists use force to impose their Islamist ideology. I'm a great fan of Mike Burgess, the head of ASIO, but in 2021, in a concession to Islamic community leaders, he said, OK, I will no longer use the term Islamist terrorism because they don't want me to use any term that, derives from the word Islam. I'll call it violent religious extremism. Now the Islamic community leaders are demanding that the government stop using the words violent religious extremism because it has nothing to do with religion. So appeasing minority group leaders who are making unreasonable demands to be treated differently from everyone else doesn't lead to any lasting settlement. The truth is, it is Islamist terror. Islamic leaders need to call it out and denounce it the minute it happens, just like, you or I would if there was a Catholic terrorist outbreak or something like that. And, it's just wrong to not use the correct term. And, of course, the current government is the most cowardly of all. Although I think, the last Prime Minister to use the correct term actually was Malcolm Turnbull, who used the term Islamist terror.
Let's go to this whole debacle regarding the detainees, the foreign detainees out in the community. Immigration Minister Andrew Giles, he was digging in today. He's not fronting the media, but he's certainly putting out the statements via reporters appearing in print that he's not returning, he's not going to go anywhere, he's not going to resign. But just into the studio now, moments ago, that Perth grandmother who was allegedly attacked by that detainee, well, she has spoken out. Have a listen.
I don't feel very safe here anymore, unfortunately. I don't. But I'm doing my best to live here. I don't know. Why was his ankle bracelet removed in March? He should be safe, but, we feel we've been let down.
So you tell me, you've been around a long time, how does Giles keep his job here? How does O'Neill keep her job?
Well, Peter, I must say I have some respect for O'Neill, but I've never seen a performance as bad as Andrew Giles in 45 years of professional journalism. A lot of the ministers in the Albanese government, apart from Jim Chalmers and Penny Wong, they never seem to be on top of the basic facts in their portfolio. All those days in Parliament when they asked Giles basic questions like how many people are subject to ankle bracelets, how many people are subject to detention orders, and he either couldn't or wouldn't say. And if he wouldn't say, that's disgraceful because they promised to be transparent. But quite often you get the sense with him that he can't say because he's just not really across the details. How can he not tell us how many people are subject to ankle bracelets? Now, they rushed these mechanisms into Parliament with a screaming urgency, ankle bracelets and detection orders to keep everyone safe. And as recently as yesterday, they were saying they opposed bail for this guy. And everything they tell you just turns out to be, to have at best an accidental relationship with the truth. Now, I've generally thought governments shouldn't sack ministers. I thought John Howard in his early days, he sacked too many ministers over trivial breaches of the ministerial code. But I now think Giles has become such a shocking symbol of the government's failure to take responsibility, its absolute inability to project any sense that it knows what it's doing or that it's in charge of anything. I don't think the government can just rely on the anonymity of Giles anymore. I think this is one of the worst ministerial performances I've ever seen in my life.
Just before we go, put your foreign affairs hat on here. Give us a sense of how you are observing what's happening at Columbia University. I think it's probably the most pronounced. The NYPD raided the university. The pro-Palestinian protesters, they're all digging in. They're likening themselves to the campus civil rights movement of the 1960s, but A, that's historically ignorant, and this protesting on campus is infecting universities around the world, including, sadly, here in Australia.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Peter. So I think they do bear some comparison to the anti-Vietnam protests of the 1960s, which were violent and sectarian, and which the last thing they cared about was the human rights of the Vietnamese, because as soon as the communists took over and the Americans were defeated, they never gave them another thought. Happy to support the Khmer Rouge in their genocide in Cambodia and all the rest. But this is sectarian, violent and anti-Semitic demonstrations. The universities have been utter models of cowardice. One of the biggest failures in our civilization at the moment is the complete collapse of morale and integrity at Western universities. Florida University has handled it well. Columbia has been terribly confused. It's good to see Columbia at last trying to restore order. It's not only that these folks are trespassing and committing property offences, they are intimidating people on the basis of their religion and ethnicity, namely Jewish Americans. It's a wave of anti-Semitism sweeping across universities of all places in the West. This is a bitter conflict, but now the authorities have to assert themselves. Otherwise, they're just saying, this is mob rule. You're just going back to the street fighting gangs of 1930s fascism if these gangs are allowed to run universities. And as you say, it's happening in Australia now too.
You're not wrong, Greg. We'll leave it there. Those live pictures there that we just showed you and at the bottom of your screen.